Our first WGC event of 2021 is coming up this week. It's the Workday Championship at the Concession, the first time they have played this course for an official event. So a lot to break down for today. It's WGC, which means there are a lot of big names in the field. So plenty to discuss to get you set for DFS for this weekend. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. And Brandon, another week, another tough beat for Tony Finau. And as Tony Finau enthusiasts on this podcast, it's very sad that this keeps on happening. I can be happy for Max Homa while also being sad for Tony Finau. You've been on Homa for a long time, pumping him up for the West Coast swing. But, did it have to come at the expense of our guy Tony once again?
Yeah, I mean, I was explaining to my wife what was going on. My wife. And, I'm sure she was enthralled, but I was explaining Tony Finau, he shot a 64, he might finally win, but Max Homa, who I like a lot, he's really fun. Very good social media presence. If you haven't seen the broadcast at all, they like to mention that. But it was I was like, why did it have to be this week that it came down to those two? Why couldn't it be Tony's week and then? But I wanted Max to win it.
I mean, Max has won semi recently. He could spread. Again, I'm in favor of Max. I am pro Max Homa, but I'd rather the rules be reversed in the situation.
No, Max Homa winning at Riviera. It's his favorite course. He was very emotional.
Fair.
Tony Finau didn't seem.
You get to get the trophy from Tiger. That's cool. So that's cool.
Look, Tony Finau's in great form. I always talked about him in the current form section. He's knocking on the door. Just please don't. Yes, if you're betting outrights, runner-ups don't do anything for you. But don't pretend runner-ups are bad somehow.
No, absolutely. And it's the same discussion we had with Rory last year. But I think people have had that conversation around Xander recently. What would happen if there were
Xander doesn't have it, Jim. He's
never won an event before. Totally. What would happen though if we had these narratives where it's a playoff with Rory, Finau, and Xander? Would Twitter just implode?
I think according to the sentiment, I think they would just continuously choke and every playoff hole would be triple bogey.
Right.
So they would keep tying and it would really never end. I think that's kind of the consensus.
Yeah. Well, Finau's going to break through eventually. It's going to happen. I'm not betting him to win, but he's golfing well. That matters. Still happy for Max Homa, though. It's a fun guy to root for sure. So conflicting emotions for sure on Sunday. Coming up this week, got an interesting little event coming up again. The first WGC event of the year, which means there is no cut. Glory, glory, glory for that. It is at the Concession Golf Club. This is normally the WGC Mexico, but of course, due to the pandemic, have you heard of it? Not happening down in Mexico this year. They have not played this course for an official PGA Tour competition in the past, so we have no real data to go on. We have some past events here, past NCAA tournament events, stuff like that, but no actual shot link data or anything. The Concession Golf Club, 7,474 yards. It is a par 72. Again, there is no cut this week because it's just a 67 golfer field. It was host of the 2015 NCAA Championship, which Bryson DeChambeau won. Sure that he's the exact same person now that he was back in 2015. No discernible changes for Bryson between now and then. There are very small greens with a lot of contours, and that could lead to us getting into some trouble with our usual faves here on the podcast. So, Brandon, you've done some digging into this course, tried to discern what we can about it. What stands out to you via your digging into this course?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a lot of guesswork no matter what, because we don't know exactly how it's going to be set up. I was actually at the beginning of the show, if anyone's watching the video, I was staring down at my phone because I was going over another GPS flyover of the course, looking specifically. I assumed
you were not listening. You were pulling a Jim and not listening. I didn't even care because I'm oh yeah, I've done that.
No, I mean, I had to retweet the link, of course, which is I forget to do a lot. But I was looking at the course, specifically looking at the par fives, and some of them are they're going to be hard to reach. And so, it rates out as a long course. Yes, certain guys will have an advantage if they can get there in 2, but it might be kind of like some of these par 5s play as, a par 5, which is intriguing. So that's one thing that stood out to me. But, again, just a lot of guesswork. It's a Nicklaus design. Some other Nicklaus designs include, obviously, the Nicklaus Tournament course, PGA National, PGA West, Muirfield Village, Valhalla. This is apparently one of the toughest courses in Florida, if not the toughest, based on the course rating. As you mentioned, there are small Bermuda greens. And I was listening to the No Laying Up pod, their Genesis recap, which Max Homa actually called in because they're all friends. But Chris Solomon recently played at the Concession. He said the greens are pretty crazy. He's projecting some guys to eject this week, have some high scores. But that does not necessarily mean, according to him, that it's going to be super hard for everyone, just that some guys will get into trouble. He said there are wide fairways, some big slopes around the green, though. So if you do miss greens, you could have some tough, time getting back up on the green. So sounds like a fairly tough test incoming. So, that plus the field factored in, I want my golfers to do everything well to a degree. So balance is going to be sort of the name of the game for me this week. I'll talk more about some balance in just a second when I talk about some past optimals at WGC events. But he did mention that there are some spots to get in trouble. So possibly you could look at accuracy. And again, if the par 5s aren't necessarily reachable, it might be more about placement, not getting into issues there. But my key stats, they're going to sound kind of silly, but I'm going to go with strokes gained putting. Well, strokes gained approach would be number 1. I get the most weight, but strokes gained putting, strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained around the green, and then possibly bogey avoidance. So all 4 of the strokes gained stats. But again, if it's a tough course, tough field, you gotta contend all 4 days. If you have holes in your game, that's going to show through over 72 holes.
And I think that although it sounds weird to make those the key stats, like that's the way you probably should approach it because A, there is uncertainty. B, there are factors that lead us to believe those will all be quote unquote key stats this week. And C, like you said, given the toughness of the field, the potential for golfers to totally implode this week, I think that being well-rounded has additional value. So sure, it might be, people might be like, oh, I want something that's a non-traditional strokes gained stat in there. But like, I think it kind of have to go that way, which is why my stats are the exact same for this week, looking at these same ones, trying to discern who is well-rounded, who can do well, who can avoid like catastrophe effectively. I think that's going to be a key for me this week. So I just don't want, like, sure, I get 4 rounds of every golfer, but if I get 4 rounds of like 10 over, I don't really want that. Like I'd like that's not as bad as missing a cut, but it's pretty darn close. You're not gonna like the effectiveness of it, where you're not going to cash in a GPP if you have one of those in your lineup. It's the same thing effectively.
Yeah, there's always this was something that I did too before I studied it, but there's like an illusion of safety in a no cut event. But like you said, if someone is just at the bottom of the leaderboard racking up bogeys, like not even close, that is effectively as bad as a missed cut. So
like when Matthew Wolff withdrew a couple weeks ago, I was like, cool, man, like let's cut this off. I don't want another round of this. We're good, buddy. Just go home, rest up. Like I was cashed out. We're good, man.
Yeah. So I'll talk more about this in just a second. But I mean, yeah, again, if you're just kind of new to PGA DFS, yes, there's no cut. There are some guys in the lower salary range who are justifiable, but this does not mean you just play 3 guys at 7,000 or whatever to play the top 3 studs. It's not going to work out. I can almost guarantee it.
And we're going to talk about the roster construction angle and past WGC events here in just one second. But first, the NBA DFS Single Entry Series is back on FanDuel. Enter FanDuel's Single Entry Series for a chance at over $50,000 in total prizes. Each week will feature a different kind of single entry contest. You can enter as many days as you like that week. We'll take your 4 highest point totals for a combined score. Finish the week with the highest combined score to win a spot in the Single Entry Championship on March 17th and a shot at the $10,000 grand prize. Other top scorers will be awarded prizes. Head over to FanDuel today and get involved in the Single Entry Series. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today eligibility restrictions apply. Let's take a look here at past WGC optimal lineups, because similar field, similar cut structure, and that can lead to similar approaches. But I also think that it's important because what we were talking before, despite the fact that it is a no-cut event, that does not mean we're punting. Like, I think that's kind of the key. There is still value and balance, because part of the reason it's a WGC event, which means there are a lot of really good golfers, which means that conceivably guys in the 10,000 and 9,000 range can win, and that also alters roster construction. So when you look back at these optimal lineups from WGCs, what do you see there?
Yeah, so I'll start at the bottom actually of my notes, but the past winners at WGCs, just starting from the most recent one and going back: Justin Thomas, Patrick Reed, Rory, Brooks, DJ, Xander, JT again, Phil back in 2018, Justin Rose in 2017, Hideki in 2017. Those are all big names. Now, you might think if those are the winners, you have to have some sort of punt plays to make it work. But I have optimal lineups from the past 7 WGCs. Only 4 of those 42 golfers across those 7 optimal lineups, only 4 had a salary below 8,000. So very few low-end punt plays. 18 of the 42 golfers were above 10,000 on FanDuel. And the average optimal salary used in these WGCs was about 58,800, we'll say, up from the overall average across sample from like 2019 and beyond. I don't actually know how far back it goes, but it's usually about 57.3. So it's a difference in the optimal salary of like 1,400, which means you're not seeing punt plays make it, despite the fact that it's a no-cut event. What you're seeing is the best golfers rising and more of your salary going toward an optimal lineup. The average winner in these WGCs has had a salary of just shy of 12K. Overall, the average is about 11.5K on FanDuel. And it's a tougher field strength this week. When we see that, we should use more of the salary, roster fewer punt options. According to the research I've done, the best guys they just generally separate over 4 rounds. That does not mean the 8,000 range is off limits. 10 of the 42 golfers in these optimals were in the 8K range, but the 7,000 range, like the low end stuff, it doesn't work the way you might think. So just if you're new to this, keep an eye on that. And I think this is another week where if we don't know a whole lot about the course, might as well go with a game theory angle for DFS too.
Yeah, I think that using the advantages that you have, the lingering advantage that you have is good when you have less information. And this is one of the lingering advantages we have, is we have this data. We can look back at what's worked in the past. And I think the most interesting thing in that data is the number of golfers above 10,000. 18 out of 42 is an average of 2.6 per optimal lineup. And that to me skews more towards balance than having a super, 2 studs and then scramble from there. So to me, I think that the point you made about the average salary of the winner is pertinent, because it means that, Jon Rahm, Dustin Johnson, they're going to be worth their salary. They're going to be considered possible winners. But I think if you do decide to go with those guys, you're going to want to go balance from there. So what we'll say pretty often is Rahm plus balance or DJ plus balance. And I think that's probably going to be the ideal approach this week. And also just looking at this specific field, I think the 8,000 range is really, really dicey. And that also pushes me more towards being more balanced. And the good thing is, although you talked about how we see the true studs emerge here, I think there are guys I would put in the quote-unquote true stud tier in the mid 10,000 range and higher. So I kind of think that my optimal approach for this week is going to revolve around peppering that mid 10,000 to like 11,000 range, the like 10.5 to 11, and living in that range more often than I usually do, because I think I can get good win equity there, but also allow myself more flexibility to not go into that 8,000 range, which is dicey at best. So I think to me, I want to be overweight on the 10,000 range relative to where I usually am. That's kind of my takeaway here. How do you apply what you've learned from looking at those past WGCs to this specific field?
Similar, but despite the fact that I think balance is super important, it still kind of implies one golfer in the 11K range. 6 of the 7 winners, which helps sort of just adjust for, like, Phil was 11K when he won in 2018, which is hard to think about Phil at 11K right now, but only one winner was below 11,000 then. That was Patrick Reed last year at this event, but different course. So he was 10-1, so no winners in the below 10,000, which is your average starting salary on FanDuel. So yeah, it's going to be like you said, Rahm plus balance or DJ plus balance, kind of whoever your stud is. We have seen some golfers not win at those elevated numbers and still make the optimal, but it's going to be. It's not by saying balance doesn't mean 9K, 10K, don't go above that. It's like a modified balance approach. And again, 4 out of 42 golfers below 8K. And, yeah, you can say whatever you want about these fields. To make a WGC, you have to be pretty good, right? But the difference is pretty good doesn't necessarily cut it against, I think off the top of my head, all of the 15 top ranked golfers in the world are in this field. So, you're going to get natural discounts on golfers in the 10K range. So yeah, trying to maximize the amount of golfers that I can kind of get above 10K without going below, like, I'll say 89 because I like Harris English a lot. But
yeah.
So yeah,
he's an exception.
Yeah. So like a modified balance approach is my overall takeaway.
So instead of getting 2 super high salary guys, getting 1 and then going, the mid 10,000s from there. I think that's the way I'll be going as well. We did mention that they have played here in the past with some golfers who were in this field. Bryson won the 2015 NCAA Men's Championship. Any other golfers who were at this event who are here this weekend? Just, of note, I guess.
Just a few. I mean, the golfers who are in this field and who played include Bryson, who won. Thomas Dietrich, who finished 3rd. John Rahm was 22nd. Scotty Scheffler, 33rd. And then Xander Schauffele was 45th out of 84 golfers. So not great.
So you gotta cross them off then, right?
Yeah, what I was going to say is I think these guys all get like a small boost.
Yeah.
But that does not mean you just play these guys blindly or avoid Scotty Scheffler because he was 6 over in 2015.
I think especially with the configuration of the course, there's value in just having played it even if you didn't, win like Bryson.
And David Lipsky, apparently, this is just a stone's throw from his house. So he has the home game for David Lipsky.
100% David Lipsky. If we're going to go with the Max Homa narrative, no place like Homa. Let's take a look at golfers who are golfing well coming into this event. We will talk about Max Homa in the latter portion. We'll start things off at the top end here because Viktor Hovland is 10-8. And I said that I think that this 10,000 range, the upper 10,000 range, pretty dang good for this week. And Viktor Hovland, obviously a part of that with 2 really good finishes in the not-so-distant past. He's 10-8. What do you see with Hovland here?
Pretty much everything. Very quiet top 5 at the Genesis. I did not see a whole lot of Hovland on the broadcast. That gives him 3 straight top 6s. Those came at Riviera in Saudi Arabia and at Torrey Pines. So some tougher tracks, some tougher fields. In Saudi Arabia, he was 2nd in strokes gained tee to green behind only Dustin Johnson, who won. Hovland lost 0.85 strokes per round on the green. His 2 recent PGA Tour finishes came by gaining at least 7.2 strokes tee to green in each event. Lost 0.7 combined around the greens, though. So what that means is the ball striking definitely there, which is what we expect from Hovland. It's the short game that's problematic. So again, I want golfers to do everything. Hovland's not as terrible with the putter and the wedges as he has been. Still a little bit of a concern, but I mean, overall, a lot to like. And I'm gonna, I've cited this a lot in my my main article on numberFire, but just trying to look for any sort of leverage I can get. Looking at the Nicklaus designs at Muirfield Village over the summer. Hovland was 3rd at the Workday Charity Open, 48th at the Memorial. So if that's worth anything to you, I mean, the data is really good, and we're talking about a balanced build, like a modified balanced build. Hovland just benefits from being in such a tough field to be 10-8. He should, based on his current form, be higher than that, but I understand why he's where he is. So he does enough for me to be in consideration for sure. I think the 10K range is pretty impressive overall. What are your thoughts on Victor Hovland here?
I think he's part of the reason the 10K range is impressive, and I think that he's definitely up there. I think that there are 4 guys. I'm going to cross off Joe Hatton because he's 11,000, and that's kind of outside the range, and we'll make it easier and just toss him out. But Hovland, Koepka, Webb, and Berger are all between 10.8 and 10.5. That's an awesome range, and I would be more than happy to roster any of those 4 guys. I would have a very hard time ranking them. So that's tough. I think that if I were to rank them, it's very possible Hovland gets moved down the list just because he is one of the few guys who has an active weakness in that grouping because the Bermuda putting has not been great. That's not enough where I'm going to cross him off, but it's going to make him not be at the top of that list. But because I like that range so much and want to be there so often, I'm still going to wind up with Hovland in my player pool as a result. But if I'm ranking those guys, he does get pushed down the list because of that. But it's really just me nitpicking because that range is so good.
Yeah, that's a really good range. I'd be fine with any of those golfers. I would put Berger first. He's just so good, doesn't have any issues. I'm actually really, really intrigued by Webb Simpson for the simple fact that, if the par 5, if he's not going to be sort of disqualified because he can't reach par 5s, but other guys can, I think Webb's very interesting, especially from the angle that if it plays difficult, if it plays where you can get into trouble, Webb can stay out of trouble by hitting fairways, placing the ball. He has an all-around short game that is just pretty much the best in the world. So if it plays from that angle, I think Webb's very intriguing. He's not going to be on the forefront of anyone's minds just because he hasn't played nearly as much as these other guys. But it like you said, it's hard to rank these 4. But these 4, you can't. I don't think you can really go wrong.
I don't think
from
you
a
can
process
either.
standpoint.
Yeah, I think that Webb is really interesting given the potential for for placement to matter more, I should say. Not for distance to matter less, for placement to matter more. I think that that's intriguing. In the short game, the lack of holes in this game is really enticing. I think that I would probably still wind up putting Brooks first because we talked about him after his win, where I didn't want to buy into him last week, but I wanted to buy into him at an event where he might care. And his history at WGCs, it might be influenced because it seems like he does care at the St. Jude specifically because of the other stuff around it. It's possible we're being misled by his performance at WGCs because he cares at the St. Jude. But there's money here. So I could see Brooks being motivated by a check. And I think that that's enough where I do want to put him first in this tier. But it's tough because I really love Webb, Berger, and Hovland too. It's just, it's tough.
Yeah. The range of outcomes for Brooks is much wider, but that also includes, any of these guys can win, but it definitely includes a win for Brooks. It also includes having him be one of the studs who's
absolutely. I like that volatility when I know a guy can hit the high end, and I know he can. And I know that you're not saying that to avoid that, but I think that it's worth reiterating. I like volatile players when it means they can win, and I know that he can do that. They can all win, but I think his win odds in my head are a little bit higher. Let's talk about Justin Thomas, because most of the guys at the top end here, you talk about the top 15 in the world are all here. Most of them are there because they are in good form, and Justin Thomas kind of isn't, so I think he's worth discussing. He's coming off a missed cut, which means he's a lock to win this week. He earned that missed cut because he lost strokes both off the tee and an approach. Pat Mayo noted on Twitter that was the first time JT has done that since 2017, which is absurd. JT also lost 5.8 strokes putting. All around bad job by JT. But things were going really well before that. He had 8 straight top 13 finishes. He had 4 top 5s. He is still 3rd in the field in approach and 20th off the tee over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. He's 11-4. And based on the betting odds, based on the other stuff around him, I would bet people will be off of him due to the missed cut last week. So do you view this as a buy low spot for JT, or was last week's performance concerning enough to keep you off, or are there just enough good options elsewhere that you don't want to go there, even disregarding last week?
So I don't care about a last week's performance pretty much ever. When I cite that, it's more just to exemplify like what's possible for certain golfers. We know it's very unlikely that JT does that again. So I'm not worried about last week. The main concern with JT is that he's struggled ever since his grandfather passed. So I don't know what he's sort of dealing with, but I mentioned the recent winners. He's got 2 of these, WGCs under his belt over the past, 3 years. So there's a lot to like with JT. And you mentioned Pat Mayo. He's actually talking about where if, some of these holes set up where it's about like just the wedge game, because some of these, par 5s might not be super reachable. It's kind of what JT does really well. He can strike the iron. He can absolutely lead this field in strokes gained approach because he has that in him. He can lead around the green. My biggest concern with JT is not necessarily the personal stuff. It's if the greens are super tricky. Where I bump down JT and just where the stats say to do it is because of the putter. So that's my main concern, but you're really just nitpicking. And so I would be fine with JT. I would not rank him at the top of the 11K range, salary considered, but there's nothing I see enough to say, like, don't play JT this week.
And I think part of the reason that I like him quite a bit outside of the assumption, I think it's the correct assumption that people will be off of him after last week. I like the salary at 11.4. That gives me a lot of extra leeway, and I don't think I'm sacrificing a ton of win equity in using him at that number. So I think that those are 2 factors that work really well in his favor. I think that if I can get that at a reduced popularity rate, sweet. I think that is enticing for me. So I do think that it's a good spot for me to get back in on JT for this weekend. Let's move down to some golfers who are not quite as spendy, one of whom is Ryan Palmer, who has been... Have you been using him recently, or is that just me? I think I might be a little bit higher.
You're always more on Palmer.
Okay, so Palmer's my guy. I'm gonna put my stick in the ground here. There's no stick, there's no ground, but I'm gonna put my stick in the ground anyway. Okay. I'm gonna claim Ryan Palmer. You can officially label him as my guy, the Ian Poulter of the actually acceptable version of Ian Poulter for this week. What do you see with Palmer? $8,600, a guy who's been very good to me recently.
Yeah, I was just looking to see someone below 9K with like the best form. That's probably Palmer, if we don't like include Harris English. But 8,600 is well within that tier of we see golfers in the 8,000 range make optimals in the WGC event, so it's not like there's a reason to avoid him just based on the salary. It's a nice number, but the form a little bit up and down, but still good overall. 4th at the Tournament of Champions, which is fairly similar to this type of field, this setup, not quite as large, but 41st at the Sony, 2nd at the Farmers, 42nd at Phoenix. So again, it's like up and down, but overall, that's good. And he's gained an average of 3 strokes tee to green over his past 5 measured events. If I'm not mistaken, before this, had good form in those. 4th at the Zozo, 17th at the CJ Cup. So again, somewhat similar fields overall. But he also kind of works from like the Nicklaus angle. He was 2nd at the Memorial, which again is a Nicklaus design at Muirfield Village. Gained 10.2 strokes from approach play. That might not mean anything, but I'm just trying because this week is so we don't know. It did miss the cut at the Workday.
You lost 13.6 strokes total on that one.
Yeah,
I had his page pulled up on Fantasy National. I was like, you talked about the Memorial. I was like, wait a minute, I just flagged in my mind that he wasn't. But yeah, same course, but.
So
that goes to show you how little the previous week means. If the exact same course, he quote unquote ejected one week and gained 14.6 strokes total the week after.
Data Golf has a really cool like query tool. And over the past 20 rounds, he ranks 11th among this field in what they call true strokes gained, which is like a adjusted strokes gained. So like, I wasn't really looking at him until I was trying to find someone with like good form below 9,000, and he stuck out. So like I'm a little more into him than I thought. He's your boy, of course, as you know. Any thoughts on Palmer?
I was tempted to put Palmer in my player picks. The reason I didn't is the putting. I think the putting is a pretty legit concern. His best surface is Bermuda, so I guess there is that. But like, if we're talking about guys who could just implode, he's one of the golfers who would fit that. Lost 4.4 putting at the St. Jude, 5.9 at the Workday Charity Open, which was again at Muirfield. He hasn't done that recently, which it possibly means that things are trending up. And again, Bermuda is his best surface, but like he could go absolutely nuts in the wrong way. So I think as a result of that, Harris English becomes definitely preferable for me. I think you agree with that. But like I think that Palmer is someone who would probably wind up being like second or third in the 8,000 range for me. $8,600 is a fair salary given his imperfections. The ball striking should be good. So I think there is enough there where I'm going to use him, but I'm not going to prioritize him over someone like English just because there's a really good chance the putting doesn't go well.
Yeah, I mean, you're just really you got a lot of issues with most golfers once you hit 9K and down. So again, it's he has one of the easiest paths to success because the irons are so good, and just you can gain more strokes through approach play than you can off the tee or around the green, somewhat similar to putting. So if you do something well, it should be, hitting the irons well. He's good tee to green, adjusted for fields, and over the past calendar year, I have him in the 79th percentile in this field. It's just the putting, but if the tee to green game is on, the putting might not matter as much. And I've tried to study this. I didn't really come to many conclusions just yet. But if the greens are like impossible, it could balance things out for everyone, or it can make the bad putters struggle a lot. So I can't say for sure which one it is because I didn't really come to a conclusion yet. But there's at least that angle you could consider
for sure. And I think it's worth bumping him down. But like you said, things could go well, and it is his best surface. So there are a couple of things. He's there, but he's not a priority. Another golfer was in that range is Max Homa, and you were talking about Homa for a while before his win. You were talking about how he tends to get better during the West Coast swing, and then he won. But now it's the stacked field, and Brandon, they're not in California anymore, Toto. They're in Florida now. So Homa, didn't win just because Tony Finau, had some issues there. He gained 8.8 strokes tee to green, 2.8 came of that on approach. He has 4 straight events gaining at least 2.8 in approach. So irons obviously being very kind to Max Homa. The concern is that the off the tee play was better than what you would expect. He gained 3.4 last week. That is his best mark off the tee since April of 2019. And we want to be careful about not buying into an outlier. He ranks 42nd off the tee over the past 50 rounds. Not necessarily a strength for him. So the salary is forgiving, and there are reasons to believe that what he's been doing is legit. However, I guess I haven't seen this as much in the data that there's a win spike. I always, in my mind, kind of account for there being a popularity spike post-win. That doesn't always wind up being the case. Like Siwoo Kim the week after he won, I mean, maybe it's just I like Siwoo Kim maybe more than others, which is why they didn't happen. But there's not always a popularity spike. But in my mind, I kind of account for it. I'm assuming that he'll be more popular than he would have been previously this week. Now, how are you handling Homa now that he's coming off a win, but also going to Florida? I'm saying that in jest, by the way.
Sorry, I'm on fansharesports.com. Homa does not have any tags yet.
How?
Which is surprising. The leader is at 15, which is Victor Hovland, just for some context. So it's not, it's early. It's Tuesday morning, but that was a little surprising. Couldn't find him. I thought he would be at least like top 15-ish. But, yeah, I mean, you got the post-win letdown, very emotional spot for him, which is it's not usually what we talk about, but I think it's very real. We've seen some guys get big wins and then not be as engaged, but So I've switched over to percentile ranks just because it makes things easy for me. And I have little red flag icons whenever someone's in the bottom 25th percentile in something. I don't have no red flags for him in any of the main stats I'm looking for this week. 54th percentile adjusted strokes gained approach over the past calendar year. He's below average in the other three strokes gained stats, but again, not terrible. Like, I wouldn't really. I kind of crossed Homa off because I thought he'd be chalky.
Yeah,
but if he's not going to be, like, you could do way worse at 9,100.
You could do worse because of what you mentioned with there being no red flags. Because, I mean, I could ask you to calculate this, but like I'm not going to. How many golfers below $9,500 have no red flags? That the number.
I almost added a column for that.
The number will be low. I can guarantee you that. So if you can find a golfer whose odds of being just hideous are lower, there is value in that. But like, it is. I would guess that by the time we get to Thursday, I would guess that people wind up being on him by then, just because he's been everywhere in the media this week. I think he was on the Pat McAfee show. He's been all over the place, justifiably, because he won. He's an engaging guy. So I would bet that even though the fan share tags are not there yet, I would bet he does still wind up being on a decent number of lineups. And I would bet that he winds up being more popular than a lot of guys in that range, just because of the high profileness, if that's a word, of the win.
So I have 6 golfers below 9,500.
Okay.
With no red flags in just the adjusted strokes gained stats. I didn't do everything.
Who are they?
Matthew Fitzpatrick, who I love this week.
Matty Fitz.
Adam Scott.
Okay.
Max Homa. Harris English. Will Zalatoris. And our boy, Ryan Palmer.
Okay. Ryan Palmer's putting not being a red flag is surprising, but I'll take it. No.
When you adjust for field strength,
okay, fair.
that helps.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And some of the guys down at the bottom who don't have any data,
yeah,
they're at the bottom. So
right. So that does push things up a bit, but still,
just a smidge.
Okay, so Homa, in consideration, I would still assume that he does wind up being popular, but from a process perspective, he does make sense. Let's take a look at what the bookmakers are saying here. Dustin Johnson, the favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook, he is 6-1. John Rahm is on an island by himself in second at plus 850. Dips down to Xander Schauffele, who's 14-1. Rory McIlroy 16-1. We get to Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, and Tyrrell Hatton at 18-1. Bryson DeChambeau, Tony Finau, and Victor Hovland are 20-1. And then Brooks Koepka rounds out the top group. He is 27-1. So we have not talked about DJ and Rahm yet. We talked about them in passing in the roster construction section, but they're the favorites. But it's also a stack field, and their salaries are high. How are you handling those two guys specifically?
I like Rahm more, which is a little scary. I'm going to talk about him in player picks because I think he has a really interesting angle. Specifically good form at the Memorial, and he has played here. So there's that angle, and you want to talk about someone with no red flags. John Rahm has that. Really underrated putter. Along else at the top who has one fan share tag, which is nice, but between the two, I like Rahm. DJ, I don't know. He just didn't really. You're nitpicking DJ, but it felt like he kind of phoned it in on Sunday, which again is not predictive of anything. And so if I had to pick one, I'm just going to go with the popularity discount with John Rahm.
Alternative angle. DJ wasn't trying because he was gearing up for the big money event and just didn't care there. Finished 8th despite gaining 0.1 but despite losing 0.1 strokes putting. 4 strokes gained in approach, 7.5 tee to green. Pretty good numbers. We know he was golfing well overseas before that event at the Genesis last week. I would go DJ over Rahm, but I also think there is a decent likelihood that I wind up being underweight on both potentially. That does depend on where Rahm settles in from a popularity perspective, because if he does wind up being just totally off the radar, then I might end up being overweight. And like, there are sometimes guys who I don't think I'll be overweight on, but I wind up accidentally being overweight on, like AJ Allmendinger, Sunday in NASCAR. I said on the podcast, I'll probably be underweight, and then I wound up over, and I was like, how did this happen? I feel weird now. I'm rooting for him, but I didn't like whatever. Anyway, sometimes I can wind up being overweight just because people are less popular than expected. I can see that being the case with Rahm, but I think I'd rather be overweight on the guys beneath them than these two guys specifically. And that's probably a mistake because, like you said, like it's generally the top end guys who win, and they are definitely the top two guys in this field. But I don't know. The salaries do matter to me.
Yeah. So I talked last week where I needed to make sure that I felt like all 6 of my golfers could win. I said it a lot on the Q&A show because I remembered I kept saying like you want 6 swipes at winning. And I just tell them as like I said that again, so it stuck with me. But the optimal lineup last week was very balanced in the 9K range and 10K range. Homa won, Cam Smith did well. So like having those like not punting, like we had like I'm kind of getting stuck, but like we had Brandon Steele last week and he made the cut. Finished okay, but like it didn't burn you if you didn't use him because the upside generally is not there, and that's getting magnified in a field like this because I talked about the recent winners. So I think I'm going to be underweight on Rahm and DJ as well, just because I want to make sure that I feel like every golfer in my lineup across all my lineups could go out and win.
Yeah,
and that's going to come from like the 9K range and up for the most part.
There are a lot of sites that are showing like optimal lineup percentages, like Daily Roto, I know, showing like what percentage of the time do these players wind up in the optimal, like if they simulate it out. And that's really cool because it can show you like how often do these guys, is there a can't miss golfer? And like a guy like Steele's never going to be at a high number.
There's like never a can't miss golfer almost.
Right, exactly. So I think especially like he was under salary. There's no one who is egregiously under salary this week. That also makes it a lot tougher to justify punting. So I do skew towards potentially not being as heavy on DJ and Rahm. If I do go them, I absolutely will be skipping past the entire 11,000 range for the second golfer in that lineup. So they're the two favorites. What second tier golfer, which is just anyone who is not them, who stands out most to you for DFS there?
Xander. Like he's so I've been working on some like major sims just because I'm curious. And it's hard to keep Xander's numbers in check because he's such a good putter that like I don't think people quite realize how good Xander is. You know, people can joke about the fact that like he hasn't won in a while, but like you want to talk about a golfer with no red flags, no holes in his game, someone who does well in no cut events, someone who can win no cut event. Like he had the best score at the Tour Championship over 72 holes. Didn't win because DJ had the lead, but like it's Xander pretty comfortably for me.
I think that makes sense. I think that again, though, I can find similar golfers at a little bit lower salary to Xander. So, and again, I'm not disrespecting Xander. I agree with you. People,
no, like I understand. I understand what you're saying, but you can't.
No,
find
similar
Xander.
like. Similar, I'm being liberal with.
I know that, but I'm being like very, very.
You're right. You're right.
I'm being very literal with that.
You are right. I am giving you that. But like I can find golfers who are what I would define as well-rounded at lower salaries who have not the same win odds, but like decent win odds. Like Daniel Berger is not the same golfer around the green as Xander. Xander's tremendous there. Berger's okay. Like he's average. I kind of view them as being a little bit similar. So I think that like I'd rather dip down, take the salary discount, and go with that. Don't.
No. Like there's been the Carlos Ortiz, Jordan Spieth like look and vibe. That I've always had, but I confuse Xander and Berger every time. They're both Adidas guys. They're both usually wearing similar stuff. Like
they're well dressed, and I think that matters.
Like Xander's not as sloppy, but like I'm like Xander's up to putt, and I'm like, nope, that's Berger, and it's like, So I always compare those two, but I would like, I would start a lineup with Xander and Berger very easily.
So I think that if I'm picking my favorite guy, not named Rom or DJ after considering its salary.
It's going to be JT, right? Based on what you said.
I think
he's going to be a little more popular than you realize.
Okay.
He's tied for 8th in tags.
Where is Xander? Not to give away.
1.
Okay. Oh, he is?
So he's like,
okay,
whatever, tied for 33rd.
Yeah.
He's up to 2.
I guess like I always play things from the what would a casual person do, and like in sports that I don't know, which I shouldn't play, but I do. Like you open up the player card, you look at what they've done recently. Yeah. Like I'm terrible at NBA. I'm going to open up that player card and look at it, and I try to ignore it, but like, just take a peek. And that influences the way you view things. You look at JT, you see the missed cut last week, you're like, oh man, like, I don't know, should I go there? Like that, I think that factors in to stuff like this. So like, what would the average golf player do? They might look at the player card, see that he has a missed cut. They might know Max Homa's won because he's been everywhere this week. That's what influences me. I don't disagree with FanShare. I think FanShare is the right way to do this. But I think that if I were to differ, I would say JT probably going to be less popular, and I would say that Homa would probably be more popular. And that allows me to feel good about JT. Like if the tags continue to come in favor of JT this week, and I can say with a decent amount of certainty that he will be popular, I have no problem just abandoning ship. Same thing with Brooks. Brooks Koepka probably going to be like, based on the early FanShare tags, might be popular. Part of the reason I like him is I think he'll be underappreciated because the betting odds I think are underappreciating Koepka right now. So if I get the read that Koepka will be popular, I'll jump off there too. But I think this is a good week to allow popularity to play a larger influence in where you're going, because there are so many good alternatives in each tier, except for the bottom tier, because there's just no one there.
My research has shown the best time to differentiate at the top is when the field's tough. This is a tough field. If you if you feel so strongly with like JT, or we haven't even mentioned Rory or Cantlay really. Yeah. Like if you feel strongly about those guys, that's fine, because you can make a case for anyone at the top. If you are trying just to like game theory this and have a really good tournament lineup, you say, look, everyone's on like Victor Hovland. He's getting a lot of buzz. No one's really on Berger and Webb. Like, yeah, there's a lot to like about Victor Hovland, but if you just play Berger and Webb instead, like they have almost identical win odds, top 10 odds. Like at that point, you're just gaining leverage by not having such a chalky golfer. So yeah. It just depends on what your goal is when you build a lineup. For me, most of what I talk about is like tournament theory. If you're playing a head-to-head, like probably play DJ. But if you're playing a tournament, like look at Xander if everyone's just tired of playing Xander.
Yeah. And I think based on the tags, like I think I trust the tags with Xander quite a bit. And I think that there is a good chance he winds up going overlooked because people go to DJ or Rom or jump down for more balance. So, yeah, I could see Xander being overlooked. Not a lot of movement so far. So which lower salaried golfers have odds to stand out to you based on the odds of FanDuel Sportsbook?
So golfers at or below 9,000 on FanDuel who have the best win odds include Justin Rose, Harris English, and Will Zalatoris. They're all 55-1. Louis Oosthuizen or Louis Westhuizen. He doesn't actually have a preference, which is very confusing to me, but I say Oosthuizen. I think you say Westhuizen, but don't quote me on that.
There's technically an U before the West. You just have to make it so Westhuizen. Like you kind of like slip it in there. I've listened to this a lot, but you're right. He has no preference. So
we're good. He's 60-1.
Yes.
Sergio is 65. Shane Lowry, 70. Ryan Palmer, Mark Leishman, Matthew Wolff, and Bubba Watson, all 80-1.
I should mention, because you mentioned Wolff there, this is not a Wolff week for me. I've had a lot of Wolff weeks recently, but the recent stuff a little concerning to say the least. And if we're going to play the angle of no red flags, does not meet that threshold. So you mentioned his name. I wanted to make sure that it's clear that although I am a Wolff supporter and someone who will use him again in the very near future, this ain't the week. That's the way I phrase that.
He's fallen off fast, and there are reasons to be worried. Outside of just the stats, seems like
outside of the injury, sometimes golf can be a very difficult sport, and that matters a lot. Weather for this week, there is a tiny bit of wind increase during the round on Friday. So the second day starts off around 5 miles per hour, but hits 10 miles per hour around 3 p.m. So that means those teeing off, in the later portion of the day would experience more aggregate wind than those teeing off early Friday. It's not drastic. It's worth noting. I'm not going to, change rosters based on that, but it's worth noting. There's a tiny bit of wind on Sunday too. It's sitting around 10 miles per hour. Never gets higher than 10. So I wouldn't fret over it. I think we can play things pretty straight up for this week. So let's dive into our player picks based on the salaries over at FanDuel for the WGC Workday Championship at the Concession. Brandon, who are you targeting in the stud tier for this week?
So I've talked myself into more Xander, which is very easy for me to do. But I think if he's going to get overlooked, that's very appealing. But my favorite guy at the very, very top is Jon Rahm. I think there's a lot to like. There's definitely an added bonus in the fact that he played here in 2015, finished 22nd, but shot 71, 75, 71, 73, so pretty solid there. Won the Memorial at Muirfield Village this summer, 27th at the Workday Charity Open the week prior. And he just does it all. 89th percentile or better, and all three adjusted tee to green stroke stats that I have, and just like a really underrated putter. It's really hard to dislike Jon Rahm this week.
Yeah, I think that Rahm makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned how DJ might be the guy you turn to in cash games. I think you can at least consider Rahm in that scenario over DJ for cash games, but it's a coin flip, I think, for cash games. And I would probably use one of those two just because the win odds are so short. For a cash game, I think that Rahm is worth considering there. My favorite high salary guy, as mentioned, is Justin Thomas because the salary is forgiving. And I think that I would still bet that there is reduced popularity this week off the missed cut. As mentioned, the stats are still good for JT. The only thing that isn't is the putting on Bermuda, which you alluded to. He's still middle of the pack there. It's not like he's bad, just kind of middling, and he's not as good as the upper tier guys there, which does matter. But he's about a month removed from gaining 8.4 strokes tee to green and 7.6 in approach at the Tournament of Champions. He's been spotty in two events since, and you mentioned that there may be reasons to explain that, but still 13th at the Waste Management, and it's still Justin Thomas. I like the idea of a balanced lineup, and he gets me there pretty well, and I think I can do that without sacrificing win equity. So I am in on JT. Any final thoughts for you on this 11,000 range in general?
Do you want to do a Xander versus JT bet?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that Xander's probably the better option because his floor is so much higher if we're doing a head-to-head bet, but I don't know. I don't care that much. There's nothing on the line.
You're up 6-2 in head-to-head bets against me, so you got some.
So JT's a
leeway.
Lock. Okay.
Got some leeway.
JT. Yeah. All right. We'll do it. JT versus Xander. Again, we're getting disappointing. These are not as poopy as they used to be. It's a letdown, but regardless. Any final thoughts for you on the 11,000 range?
I really say, you can throw DJ in there, but play. I think my main lineup's going to have one of those guys.
Yeah.
And then the modified balanced approach, which would include Daniel Berger.
Wow. Look at that segue. Who's a pro?
Stepping up into the I'm crossing over a little bit. With my duties there. I better,
love it. Love to hear it.
But yeah, I mean, most recent event was a win. No issues in his profile. 77th percentile putter on Bermuda over the past 100 rounds. His 2021 has been very, very good overall. 3 top 10s. Did miss a cut right before the win, but that was with good data. So not a whole lot of reason to jump off. Went to Florida State. Is from Jupiter, Florida. So, there's a Florida angle if you can consider it, but Jupiter's on the East Coast. This is on the West Coast. Florida State's up north, so it's a big triangle. But I mean, you at least have that. I think there's a lot to like about Berger anyway. But I mean, we mentioned Hovland, Webb. I think Patrick Reed's still in play. Sung Jae's in play on Bermuda. There's just a lot to like in this range, so I want to maximize my exposure here. And that will include
Brooks Koepka. So let's talk about Brooks. I think that Webb deserves additional mention here. So I do want to mention Webb as being.
I'm going to ask you to rank.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about Brooks. We talked about him coming off his win at the Waste Management, and what we said then, or I don't know, at least I did, was that it gave me confidence in buying into him once we got to an event where he would try. And I think there's a chance that happens this week. Koepka, when he won at the Waste Management, gained 6.1 approach and 2.6 off the tee, gained 2.1 again last week at the Genesis. So that's good. He is a good Bermuda putter. He ranks 12th there the past 100 rounds. That's tops among all golfers at his salary or higher, which is interesting. I wouldn't look at this for any other golfer, but I think with Brooks, motivation does matter and tends to put forth a good effort at the WGCs. Last year, he was second at the St. Jude. He won the St. Jude the year before that. Top fives in 2017 and 2018, and one of those was the HSBC. So it's not just the St. Jude where he puts forth a good effort. So the floor here for Koepka is not as good as Webb or Berger, I would say, but I think the upside is a little bit higher. So if I am taking a tournament-centric mindset, which is how I tend to play things, I would go Koepka 1, I would go Berger 2, Simpson 3, Hovland 4. But I think because I like this range so much, having Hovland 4 is not going to exclude him from my player pool. What about you?
I'm going to rank them Berger, Webb. These four specifically would be Berger, Webb, Hovland, Brooks.
Okay. What is it the floor concern that puts you off of Brooks?
Yeah, that's really it.
Fair enough. Let's move to the mid-range. Who do you like there?
I'm going to go Scotty Scheffler. 10K exactly. Played the concession back in 2015 for the NCAAs. Finished 33rd.
You would have been like a first year in 2015, right? He'd been super young.
I don't know.
Let's look this up. Go ahead.
It was 6 over, but shot 72, 78, 72, 72. That's more of a bonus for me than something that I absolutely have to see because there's so few golfers with form at this course of any kind. He has some red flags, which is usually something that disqualifies a golfer for me. But it's just for from a Bermuda putting angle. But his putting is sort of trended up of late, which is nice. 20th at the Genesis last week, 22nd at the Memorial. Did miss the cut at the Workday Charity Open if you care about that Nicklaus angle, but there's a lot to like about Scheffler. I like Sung Jae Im too at 10-2. So I'm really trying to hover around a balanced build here this week.
I agree that Sung Jae is enticing. The around the green plays, a thing. But I think that he is very much in play. Also, Scotty Scheffler, the 2015 Phil Mickelson Freshman of the Year. How did we overlook that? I'm disappointed that we did not know that he was the 2015 Phil Mickelson Freshman of the Year. Disappointing. Speaking of young people, let's talk about Joaquin Niemann. He had a rough weekend at the Genesis. Looked so good first couple of days. Was feeling good about I think Niemann was my win pick last week. I was feeling good, feeling myself after, I think it was just Thursday actually, but regardless, I felt good. Didn't last long, but he was playing well before that, and things have been going well for him going in too. I don't want to, 2 rounds of bad Niemann to make me overlook a much larger, better sample because Niemann lost 3.7 on approach for the tournament. In the 2 other events in 2021, he gained 7.3 and 4.1 on approach. Gained 2.8 off the tee at the Genesis. He has now gained there in 10 straight events, including gaining 3.7 at the Sony. The putting is a concern because they're not on bent grass. But we talked about this a couple of times recently where he's getting better results recently on non-bent grass surfaces. POA is his worst surface, which is what they were on last week. And he still lost 1.4, which for him is not terrible. He ranks 9th off the tee and 14th in approach the past 50 rounds. And I feel good enough about the putting to get behind him at this number. So I do like Joaquin Niemann in that upper 9,000 range, $9,800. What about you? Because it's not just the putting, the early on the green play is middling. What are your thoughts on Niemann?
There's enough. The putter's going up. but 86th percentile or better in both adjusted strokes gained off the tee and adjusted strokes gained approach over the past calendar year, according to my data. I don't know if it sounded like we like everyone this week, but
Yeah.
Look, it's a WGC. These are very good golfers. It's easy to like a lot of people, but I would say Neiman is one of the standout plays in the 9K range, which actually I was pretty stringent, if that's the right word, with who I wanted to talk about in this 9K range.
Yeah.
That's why I talked about Scheffler. I kind of the low 9,000 range did not really speak to me this week, which I thought was kind of where I would be living.
Yeah.
But nobody really jumped out, so I think Neiman is one of the best plays in the 9K range.
Yeah. I agree. Who else do you like here in the mid-range?
I'm going to go with Matthew Fitzpatrick. I think a lot is in his favor. We generally see him play best at tougher courses, which this absolutely could be. It could really emphasize a good short game, a good putter. He finished 5th at the Genesis last week, was 3rd at the Memorial at Muirfield Village, 27th at the Workday Charity Open at the same course, back to back. 99th percentile Bermuda putter. So if you play the angle that this is a little more difficult, Fitzpatrick does enough. If not, I might not have anyone really in my lineups below 9,500.
Yeah. Fitzpatrick, I believe, must have gone back to Matthew because that good finish last week also had a win internationally over the winter. So I have to assume he's gone back to Matthew as opposed to Matt, which means we have to bump him up manually in our minds to feel good about that. And I think that there is somewhat similar reasoning for why I like Jason Day, because I think the short game is going to be there, and I think that matters quite a bit this week, and that's enough for me to get on board with Jason Day at $9,200. He ranks 2nd in the field, both around the green and in Bermuda putting, so I think that the short game will be awesome. He ranks 28th off the tee, which at least isn't terrible. It's not a strict accuracy course. The placement angle is concerning with Jason Day because he could spray and totally just go to HE double hockey sticks in a hurry. There's also questions around the approach play. 53rd there the past 50 rounds, but there have been good weeks. He gained 2.5 in approach in just 2 rounds of the waste management, gained 7.9 at the PGA over the summer, 3.9 at the WGC St. Jude, 2.5 at the Memorial, which was a Nicklaus course. So I think when you add the possibility for good ball striking to his short game, there is enough there with Day to take the risk on him. I will say, though, that I also don't like this range. So although Jason Day is a player pick, I'm not going to prioritize him. I would rather jump down to someone like Harris English in the 8,000 range, or try to find the salary to get up to the Neimans of the world. I think this is the weakness of this field, is the low 9,000 range. Outside I think that creeps into the 7,000 range too. Pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean the 7,000 range does not really appeal to me. But I think that the low 9,000 range concerns creep into the upper 8K range. Aside from Harris English, possibly Will Zalatoris, but he is definitely not without flaws for this kind of setup, unless he can just nuke it and get to those par fives, which
right,
occasionally he'll be able to do. But
yeah.
So I'm probably not going to be in the low 9,000 range either. So for my 2 low salaried picks, I'm going a little bit lower.
Okay.
My first one being Kevin Gnaw at 8,000. Finished 9th at the Memorial. He is one of 7 golfers below 9,000 to rate 50th percentile or better in both adjusted strokes gained tee to green and putting. That's kind of just enough to be in play at that salary. I think Zalatoris is at least intriguing. Maybe Abraham Answer, but I'm probably gonna. I mean, I gotta start cutting guys eventually. So probably Ryan Palmer above Answer, but I'm going to be a more balanced range, but I do think there's merit in one golfer like a Kevin Na. It's going to open up a lot, and you're not being reckless. We see golfers in the 8K range make the optimal here.
Right. And I think that the one is the key word there. Having one of those guys and banking on them doing well as opposed to banking on two guys in this range doing well. One could happen. Two is like you make a 2-golfer top 10 parlay on someone in this 8,000 range, you're just flushing money at that point. So I think one is fine. One guy who I think is an exception to the disdain we have towards the value range is Harris English. We talked about it a couple of times. Here's why. He has, the approach is not great. Ranks 40th there the past 50 rounds, and he did just lose 2.2 in missing the cut at the waste management, but he's capable there, as he showed over the summer, and the short game will be good. English ranks 7th, both around the green and in Bermuda putting. Not a loser in terms of distance, and he can place it well. Ranks 37th off the tee in that time. So basically, I am betting on the ball striking for English regressing, or I guess progressing from where it was last week and where it's been the past couple of events, getting back to where he was over the summer. And if he does that, he could be a rock star with his short game once again. So I like English a lot. What puts you on him at $8,900?
He is easily the most likely golfer to win below 9,000 in my simulations. Just is very, he's very, very good. My model loves English and Berger like every single week, just from how good they are statistically based on where their betting odds are. Good on Bermuda, 13th at the Memorial. Like, and he's just a standout play from an all-around perspective down in this range.
Yep, I agree, and very okay with him in a cash game. From a cash game perspective, though, I'd probably try to make him the floor from a salary perspective. I wouldn't want to go beneath him for a cash game. You mentioned you are okay with one golfer who is lower salaried and betting on them to do well. You mentioned Nas being one of them. Who else would you consider for that mold?
Kevin Kisner at 7,900. I know it's rare for a golfer in the 7,000 range to make an optimal in WGCs, but I think it's a little semantics to say like that Kisner at 79 can't or is very unlikely to do so just because of the salary. He could be, higher salaried. His long-term form is really good for this number. Really stands out in the low salaried range. The irons have kind of been there for him. I have him in the 74th percentile, and once I adjust for field strength, he's a good putter. We know that. So like, if distance doesn't destroy him, like his lack of distance doesn't get him, like there's no reason to think that he couldn't just chip away at this course that can play tough and succeed. And
we talked about that angle with Webb liking him.
Fitzpatrick probably.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick as well. English is not a bomber either, so I think that it's a good angle to play, and you could play that angle like across multiple golfers in the same lineup.
And that could be the absolute worst read.
Sure.
But
there's uncertainty, and like I feel like that's not going to be the most popular angle to play this week. So, and I think that it's very possible it's the right angle. So I'm okay with that. I think that playing that angle across multiple golfers in the same lineup makes sense. Another golfer I think is viable in the 8,000 range is Shane Lowry. We don't have a lot of data stateside on Lowry recently since the Masters, and hasn't been doing all that hot internationally. So there are some question marks around the form, but he was really solid the last time we saw him on the PGA Tour. Lowry ranks 33rd in the field off the tee, 17th in approach, 27th around the green over the past 50 rounds. In 14 measured events since the end of the COVID layoff, he has gained on approach 10 times, off the tee 12, around the green 10 times. That's good levels of consistency, even with some missed cuts sprinkled in there as well. Now, Bermuda is the worst surface for Lowry, but he's still just a smidge below average on it. I think that you could do worse than him at $8,300. I would say the Palmer's in consideration here too, but what are your thoughts on Shane Lowry?
I don't really have any. I'm not going to use him. I don't see enough in his profile for me specifically. That's not to say he's a bad play, but we talked about a lot of golfers we liked more than we typically do. But it's a WGC, and these are like the best golfers in the world. So I want to make sure that I'm only playing guys who I really feel strongly about, and I don't see it with Lowry, and that's enough for me just to, as you would put it, divest.
I like it. I don't like it because you're disagreeing with me, but I like the terminology. Okay, win picks for this week. We both get two winners based on their current odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I know who I'm picking. You can probably guess who I'm picking. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Is it JT?
JT and Brooks are my two.
JT and Brooks. That's pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. JT is 18-1 and Brooks is 27-1 for those following along at home.
So my model showing Berger in English as values again, but I might the one name that's a little bit longer that intrigues me is Matthew Fitzpatrick, but if not, this is a little anticlimactic, but I might go Xander and Bryson.
Okay, yeah.
14 and 20.
Oh, Bryson. Last week was not fun. He did the worst thing he possibly could have done. He made me assume he'd miss the cut, gave me a little bit of hope later in the round Friday, and then was like, no. Your hope was misguided. Stop tracking this. Close your tab, bro.
I keep picking Xander, but he's got to win eventually.
I mean, like there are reasons you keep picking him, and it's not a Finau situation where he can't win. He's proven he can. He just hasn't recently, like super recently, I should say. So like, you don't need to justify backing Xander to me. I understand it.
I don't think I have to get cute for this purpose with Fitzpatrick at 50-1, but he's someone I will very strongly consider as like one of my long shots.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay,
which 50-1 this week is a long shot. So
you have Xander and Bryson, and I have JT and Brooks. That is all the time that we have for today, at least on this podcast. Do not forget that Brandon has his PGA Q&A coming up today, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. That is live on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope channels. Brandon taking your questions about PGA DFS and also PGA betting. He'll go through his sheets, let you know his thoughts on various golfers you may have questions on. So make sure you tune in there, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope channels. A lot of other good stuff happening here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. As always, Tom Vecchio has you covered for NBA and NHL DFS Monday through Thursday. Are you making your Daily ISO debut this week, or is that Austin Swaim this week?
It's going to be Tom, actually, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I think he's figuring it out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess not.
I was all ready. I was going to be like, hey, like I was planning my intro just in case, and just addressing the disappointment people would have when they realize that it's me and not Tom.
Imagine planning your intro more than 5 seconds before you start. Couldn't be me, as people can tell. There's not a lot of thought that goes into those.
And man, I got to take notes for my Q&A show.
No, you really don't.
Just stammering.
You really don't. Regardless, make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. NASCAR coming up Friday, I think we decided, 10:30 on YouTube, but also on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed immediately after that. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. Brandon, people have questions for you before the Q&A. Where can they find you on Twitter?
I'm at Gdula 13, GDULA 13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Good luck to all of you for this week at the WGC-Workday Championship at the Concession. Hopefully things go well for you at the new course. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.